Welcome to Civics for the People with Commissioner Mo Ivory, another episode where we are making sure you understand what your elected officials are doing. This is like an expose into the work of government, because the one thing I cannot stand is when someone says, I didn't know about that. Well, I didn't know that they offer that. So I'm going inside as an elected official, giving you the information that you need to know. And so Fulton County is a very big county. In fact, I've told you before, the largest county in Georgia. 159 counties in Georgia. Fulton County, the biggest, okay? So we're gonna talk about, what do you get from Fulton County? What do I even need my county for? How does this county run? So I'm so excited today to bring our county manager, Dick Anderson, to the conversation. We work on a county manager system. We're gonna explain that to you, and we're gonna let you know all the things that Dick is in charge of every single day so that the county can continue operating. Just think like he's the president of the county, okay? He manages it from day to day. So Dick, welcome to Civics for the People.
Thank you, Commissioner.
How are you?
Very good.
So a lot of people get confused, like a mayor, in DeKalb, they have a CEO system. Tell us about how Fulton County works on a county manager system, and exactly what is your job?
Great question, and I try to explain to friends of mine, just like you're explaining it to constituents. I function as the CEO. In other words, I'm the top administrative officer, but it's very different than a corporate environment. The elected officials that sit on the Board of Commissioners, you and your 6 colleagues, are the top decision makers in the
Like
county.
the board of directors, if it was a corporation?
But I would say even more strongly involved in a board of directors, because you do more than just set policy. You do set direction. I think you allocate resources, making the final decision on budgets. So it's different from that. And then you have this very important function, which is directly listening to constituents, which I think you do a terrific job of. This is another example. My job is to synthesize as best I can the priorities of the commissioners. That's, in my mind, job 1.
Okay.
Set a tone at the top, even though there are 7 of you, and then there are 30 plus other elected officials in Fulton County. There is the ability for one person to say, which I've tried to do over the last 10 years, that look, our tone is, let's be the best at impact, service, and efficiency through engaged employees. And we've kept that theme throughout, and that's been very helpful, because some of our compensation plans, recognition programs, how we judge different investments that we make, what we emphasize in terms of treating the citizen as a customer in terms of service, all kind of tie back to that. The other parts, I guess, of my job, for lack of a better description, is set a strategic plan that attempts to accomplish those synthesized priorities that the board has given us. The 2 that seem to be very pressing right now are public health and public safety, which you've been very involved with both.
Yes.
And you can imagine those can take on everything from opening new clinics, which we're doing, a standalone emergency room in South Fulton, addressing day-to-day issues at the jail, accelerating the progress through our courts. So there's multiple things that come out from under that, and some of them, leading to kind of the next item, is we have to create a multi-year plan. You've been a huge proponent of that.
Yes.
Because much of what Fulton County does, because of its size and scale, can't just be accomplished overnight. It really does benefit from understanding what we're trying to do over a multi-year period. And then maybe the next part is aligning the financials or aligning the budget to comport with that.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, another part of my job is to make a recommendation to the commissioners, the way our structure is aligned and the way the ordinance that's written about the budget reads, is that I collect a lot of information through our finance staff and obviously through the department heads and other elected officials, bring it together, test it against a strategic plan and the board's priorities, and then present a budget. But in the end, for an annual basis, but in the end, it's the commissioners who decide exactly which things get funded and which do not. Things get added during that process. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of want to break down a little bit of what you said, because I think the most important thing about civics is for people to understand it in plain English. And so when you say you kind of like set the priorities for the commissioners, that's when we meet on that first and third Wednesday. That's our meeting. For everybody who doesn't know, we meet on the first and third Wednesdays, and that's called a Board of Commissioners meeting. And that agenda that comes to us is what the priorities are that you have strategically been examining, I guess, the whole year through. And each meeting, we either adopt some of those priorities, we vote on those priorities. And so that's what you mean when you say you present the commissioners with the priorities, right?
And yes, ma'am. And I'm really, if I didn't say it appropriately, I'm trying to synthesize what I think the priorities are.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
at one level, it's 7 different opinions.
Right.
Right. And we don't
Right.
have a committee structure. That may be another civics lesson.
Right.
It's kind of a committee of the whole, unlike the city of Atlanta or other cities perhaps. So yes, but in the end, what we attempt to do is bring forward things that we have heard from the commissioners as a priority and turn that into something that can be funded and can be delivered to citizens.
Yeah. And for us here in Fulton County, government terms like health and human services and public safety, just really mean hospitals and healthcare and, urgent cares and clinics. And then it means courts and jail.
Yes.
Right. And so when people say public safety, I think they go like, what, but that just means like, the jail. It means the courts. So that's really what we're talking about when we say that kind of stuff. So why did you want this job?
About 15 years or so ago, I was an executive with Bell South and then with AT&T. The choice was to either move to San Antonio, Texas at the time, or stay here in Atlanta and pursue public service. And I had been, in that year preceding, the chairman of the Atlanta Chamber. So I got very interested in public service vis-a-vis that experience, and really wanted to do something of that nature. So this is my 3rd public service job. One was working for Governor Perdue in transportation. One was in D.C. with the Federal Reserve, and then this job. And honestly, this one, and I don't say that in a solicitous manner, has been my favorite because it is the most consistent with my experience, which was service delivery and leading a large organization. So I really, it resonated with me. This is my home. I've been here 35 years. Fulton County is my home.
Yeah.
And so therefore I thought I could add something to it. I said, at the beginning, I'd like to apply as much private sector practices to the public sector.
Yeah.
But the public sector is very different. And that was motivating to me, and now it's been very rewarding over the last 10 years.
And you've been the county manager for how long now?
Just over 10 years.
Just over 10 years. Okay. Big question. And I think a lot of, I had to ask you this question when I think maybe I even asked you this question before I was sworn in, but after I'd won my election. How does the county make money?
Well, it's actually fairly simple, and I guess I'd maybe characterize it in this way. Of course, we're not a corporation
Right.
that is earning a profit. What we do, though, is we collect taxes on the basis of property values, and that makes up more than 80% of our revenues. So in some governments, it's a lot more complicated than that, income taxes and sales and use taxes and the like, but ours is principally property tax based.
Okay.
And each year, properties get evaluated. Ultimately, a tax rate, or what's called a millage rate, is set by the Board of Commissioners. Of course, that's coming soon for this year, and then that generates the income. We also do collect some sales taxes. That's an agreement made with all of our cities. So that contributes, but by far and above, I should say, property taxes.
Okay. So the county gets most of its revenue from property taxes, about 80%, about 20% from various other taxes that come in.
Yes.
And because I think a lot of people are confused, like when you say you're paying taxes, they don't really understand what their taxes are going for. And so it's a complicated thing to understand, and we're going to do a whole thing on taxes, but I think it's just important for people to know that that property tax revenue, and it's not only residential properties, it's also commercial properties,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
So when people think about a Starbucks that's located in their neighborhood, that property is also paying taxes, which come into the county.
Yes.
Okay, that's important to mention. So then you use that money to pay for, tell us about about the top things that are on the budget meaning how you allocate those monies that come in. What are some of the top items that are the most expensive things the county has to pay for?
Well, far and away, the most expensive is employing almost 5,000 people to provide service to citizens.
Okay.
And again, those range in such, and one of the more interesting parts of this job is that it's very diverse in terms of all of the different services. Quite frankly, being a citizen of Fulton County, I didn't understand what all these service offerings were.
Yeah.
But most people understand the court system. Sometimes they don't know that it's run, staffed, maintained by Fulton County, but everything about magistrate, state, and superior court is a county function. The jail, which you've already mentioned,
Yes.
obviously is a county function.
Yes.
But then senior centers, we have a number of those, 20-something. We have 30-something libraries. We have behavioral health services. We fund public health clinics.
Yeah.
The water system, the wastewater treatment system, as well as freshwater in certain parts of the county, or drinking water, are funded by Fulton County. So there's in fact, there are 40 departments that make up all of these offerings and provide these services.
Yeah, and can you think of a service that people wouldn't even know about? I mean, well, you know what? I'll name one, because when I thought about it, I thought I didn't know about that. The burial services that, right. Okay, so tell us about that. I don't think that many people know about that, and that would come through because we have a coroner, right? We're responsible for the coroner. So just speak to that for a second.
Yeah, so it's interesting because one of the first things I did upon being appointed was try to visit all services and as many sites as I possibly could.
Yeah.
That site is a very interesting one, obviously, because it is the coroner or the medical examiner. And you're dealing with families that generally are in crisis because of what's just happened.
Yeah.
You're dealing with medical professionals that have to render a judgment that may be involved in court or criminal cases. But as a part of that, we do find indigent folks who don't have a way to be buried. They're not financially, there's not a family, or there's not the ability. So we do provide indigent burial services and a chaplain that also oversees that. People would not know that generally.
I mean, it's a very respectful, kind service that I think if a family finds themselves in the situation where they just do not have the funds to bury a loved one or a friend, whatever it is, they could actually call the county and we could help. And so, I mean, I just thought I really
Yes,
wanted to
ma'am.
bring that up because I thought that was so important to let people know about, because it's just important for, and when I look at the A to Z services guide, we have a 25-page A to Z services guide that I wish every single citizen would come pick up or get their hands on or look at it online, because there's just so much that the county offers. If you don't have medical insurance and you need to go to a clinic, there are clinics you can go to for free. There's just so much that I wish citizens, and I want our constituents to get more involved in it and know that we're taking in those property taxes so that we can help them and use that money for important things. So there is a crisis, at our jail. We are under a consent decree, which that is not new. Like, we've been under one before. So as the county manager, how do you work through, there was a cyber attack, right? They got into our system and they wanted us to produce a ransom. And, so tell me about how you manage those crisis situations.
I guess I would describe it as a whole of government response. Some of these are managed by elected officials. As an example, the jail operation is managed by an elected sheriff. But the building itself is managed by the Board of Commissioners and then ultimately the county management team. So that requires more than just one individual, and that's what I mean sometimes when I say I may function as the CEO, but it's very, very different. It demands, quite frankly, a collaboration across multiple parts of government. So with each of those, whether it's been the COVID response to the consent decree, has been assembling a group of people, of which I'm just one of the group, and attempting to, as best we can, get all the perspectives, deal with what would have the most impact, try to have a timeline, of course, that we're following, and a plan, And then we come back, as you well know, to the Board of Commissioners for any resources that are needed to address that. That's what we've been doing, I think, methodically now with the jail situation. So each initiative that is coming up consistent with the consent order that we're following is brought to the Board of Commissioners essentially every other week for approval. And they've all been approved because I think they've been vetted, they're impactful, and they're consistent with the decree. And in the same way, again, with the cyber attack, we assembled a whole of government approach because it affected every department. Every department needed to find a workaround to continue to provide service to citizens. And I'm really thankful to say we never closed an office. We never shut down a service. We found a way when there wasn't a way. I think that somebody else said that long ago. But that allowed us to continue because of that emphasis on service and the understanding of our impact to overcome that. Now, in the end, of course, we've done, as you well know, we've done a lot to further strengthen our IT environment, move things to the cloud. So then you're even relying on people outside of Fulton County, which we do at our jail as well. We have a rich, I think, network of vendors that support us, whether it's technology or in facilities, and organizing those efforts are part and parcel to a whole of government approach.
How challenging, well, speak to the challenge of operating a more than $1 billion budget, and so much of it is dependent on elected officials that change, or that can be cooperative or uncooperative, or some are more learned than others are. Like, what are the challenges of that being the head of the largest county in Georgia?
I think that's probably the central challenge, quite honestly, because it's definitely not where one person or even one small group can set expectations, if you will. So it requires, again, a lot of collaboration. We have found that establishing key performance indicators, which each department, elected, led, or not, contribute to and quantify what their most important outcomes are for citizens. We then took that approach and connected it to pay. So while it's a modest bonus, like 2 to 3% of salary. Now, most people in the commercial world would think this is nothing.
That's nothing, right?
But in the government world, it really is impactful. And I find that folks more and more, appreciate the fact that they can control their own destiny, i.e. serve citizens well, accomplish what they're setting out to do, and then they find a reward on the back end. We've kind of doubled down on that with recognition. So we have significant recognition programs held quarterly and then on an annual basis for both customer service excellence and then overall impact. And many times they're nominated by their peers, which is very meaningful to employees to think, well, gosh, somebody that I work with nominated me, and there's an independent committee that ultimately makes this decision. But all of that wrapped up together, while we'll never get past necessarily that there are independent decision makers, and rightfully so, because they've been elected by the public. But at the same time, I think there has been some benefit and cohesiveness because there is a strategic plan, there are a set of indicators, those indicators link to pay, and then those lead to recognition. There's enough commonality, I guess, in all of that you can effectively keep the organization cohesive.
With all of the, sort of federal employees being fired and, this administration thinking, we don't need that group, they're not important. Do you think, or have you sensed that some of our local government employees have felt that sort of nervousness about that kind of attitude might trickle down to local government?
I thought you were going to ask, have we seen any apply, which we have.
Oh, okay.
So we are beginning to be able to hire folks.
Oh, that's wonderful.
These layoffs become reality.
Yeah.
It's sad. In fact, I got a personal note from someone just the other day whose daughter had been impacted. And hopefully we will hire her because it looks like she has a tremendous set of skills.
Yeah.
And this would be in community development. But I think, I hope that our employees have not sensed that. One of the things that I am proud of is that during at least this last 10 years, we have not engaged in any reductions in force of any significance.
That's great.
We may have as we moved a department from county-led to state-led. The public health or board of health is one of those. There may have been some disruption but generally not, and there's been none of that for economic or cost reduction reasons. So I do think we've given employees higher expectations, but a feeling of fundamental security, which I think is
That's
the
important.
bond that you have to have.
And local government's more important more than ever now, because there's
Yes.
so much instability in our national government that, getting local and understanding how this is why it's so important for people to understand the function of their county and of their city. And talking about that, how do you liaise with the cities? Fulton County has 15 cities, so 15 municipalities that it's under, Atlanta being the biggest one, and Mountain Park, which the chairman taught me about the other day, being the smallest one with about 700 or so residents. How do you work with each of those municipalities as sort of, the figurehead of all of those working operations?
Well, I think we've tried to do it at 2 or 3 levels. Level 1 was when I was first appointed, I visited every city. And of course, there's been change in leadership in many of those, some there haven't. So establishing a personal relationship with both mayors and city managers has been important to me and important to our team. Secondly, what we have done is, particularly through programs, whether it's where we distribute federal dollars to cities that they then use for infrastructure investments, I think is a very important way that we reinforce our importance and relationship to them. Also, when we're talking about what we're going to do in a library or what we're going to do in a senior center, we just visited with a program that's called Fulton Fresh.
Yeah.
That's another one that citizens might not know about,
Yes.
but where we deliver healthy tips on diets, free vegetables, and in an environment where people can compare notes on how to raise a garden. Well, we will do that at a senior center. In this case, we did it in Union City at a senior gathering place that Union City owns, that Fulton County doesn't own.
Yeah.
So in collaboration with Mayor Williams, we did that. So I think also through programs. And then last, which we probably, quite frankly, need to get back to now as I'm sitting here being asked this question, we have had a forum with mayors. Now, a lot of times this has been in light of either an opportunity or a crisis. The best opportunity, I could say, and by the way, I think this is historic, was Fulton County did not have a specialized tax for transportation. It had always gone to MARTA, which is great because that gives us a rail system when we're competing against others, not just locally, but internationally, that others don't have. We do have it, but that's where our transportation tax has gone. The downside was, though, we didn't have it for basic road repair, lane widening, things that GDOT would not do on city-owned streets. We passed that in great collaboration with the cities almost 10 years ago. Now, in fact, it will come up for renewal next year. COVID was the example of a crisis, and COVID was where we brought the cities together and really focused on what were the keys to both stemming this pandemic as well as preparing for after that. And we did everything, of course, from testing and vaccination, setting up centers in cities, and the largest in the state at Mercedes-Benz, but then also investment in small businesses. I just saw recently a report where during COVID, we provided $3.5 million, I think is the number, in seed funding for small business loans. That's now been leveraged to $45 million in loans to entrepreneurs in Fulton County.
Yeah.
And that was all done in collaboration with our cities.
With the cities. And that's another thing. I don't think small folks think about Fulton County for small business, or they don't think about it for emergencies like COVID, and that would come under Health and Human Services.
Yes.
So we played a huge role in providing those services. What do you think, what is their biggest challenge right now with Fulton County?
I think the biggest challenge is I talked about some way coalescing around. There are many priorities that we all face, and certainly as elected officials, because you're dealing with constituents day to day, you certainly face. But now we know that in public health and public safety, we have some enormous issues to deal with.
Yes.
And they're not going to go away. Sometimes in government, you can just wait for the parade
Problem
to
to-
pass,
yeah,
as
yeah,
they
yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And I don't think on these two, in that we had 2 significant hospitals close, we have a jail that's under a consent order, and we have society in general that have needs. I don't think that those can be dealt with without, again, a very thoughtful, multi-year strategic plan, both for investment and operationalizing, and quite frankly, with key partners.
Yeah.
So I think knitting all of that together is our biggest challenge. But to me, that's why, and I'm sure you are, that's why we're in public service, is to
Sure.
make a difference.
And to identify these huge problems that are going to keep happening, right? Problems don't just stop, like
No.
even with a 3-year plan, right? We're
Right.
not going to just put that 3-year plan and then after the 3 years, oh, we're scot-free, no
Mm-hmm.
more problems. They're going to happen. And so planning, and also I think things like this, citizens being aware of what
Yes.
is going on is the most important. What do you think we do really well in Fulton County versus what we could do better?
I've said for some period of time, we are very, very, in fact, I'd say we're at our best when we're responding to a crisis. I've been amazed, given I have almost 40 years in management, that when we're faced with a cyber attack that could have shut down all services, or we're faced with a pandemic with no playbook whatsoever, and quite frankly, an incident rate in Fulton County that was almost double the state's, that in the end, when we come together, we coalesce, our leadership, meaning our elected leadership is involved, we resource it appropriately, we have a tremendous ability to respond to that. So I'm very heartened by that. And again, some of my best experiences, again, in all this time with a public utility and with government have been with Fulton County. I think what we're not good at times is setting clear priorities, because sometimes everything is a priority. When everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority.
Yeah.
But I recognize the difficulty, and I've said, sometimes we'll hear from just a handful of citizens about one thing, and that seems like it's got to be the most important, and not that it isn't important, but some way that's got to all be sorted through.
Sure.
And coalesced around for us to really move the needle,
Sure.
for like, using that old term.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard for us to set just few priorities and stay focused because of the distractions that occur.
Well, I'll tell you from having moved to Atlanta in 1987 and lived in Fulton County the entire time, I've seen massive improvement in even just coming in to get a tag, where now you just can go to Kroger and get it,
Right.
on your way out, to being able to pay your solid waste bill online and immediately get a receipt. And it's, you have all kinds of options. I think I paid with Apple Pay, the other day. This is fantastic, So, I think the automation has been really good
Right.
in terms of services. And a lot of people, a lot of my constituents, I've made them aware that we have a customer service number, that if they just are confused or want to know if this is something that Fulton County does, they can just call the customer service number, and they can just Google Fulton County customer service and call.
And we get tens of thousands now to that number.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And we have a customer service desk here at 141
Right,
Prior, where
right.
hundreds of people come in per year, either seeking information or just trying to get wayfinding through buildings.
Sure.
I do think one of the things I should have said probably in response to that is also an emphasis on customer service. I have seen folks really step up to that notion, that challenge. Part of it is it is a key performance indicator, but I think it's the spirit of service.
Sure.
They want to do well.
They want
and
to get you
just
your birth
need it to be
certificate. They want,
enabled.
they want to help you with vital records and things. And
Right.
I find that here, that everybody is very friendly, and people should not be afraid to embrace their government, right?
Yes.
Come in, get what you need, ask if we provide it. If we don't, we'll send you across the street, or we'll tell you to go to the city of Atlanta, or we'll let you know where the thing is that you need. And I think that's an important
Very.
invitation, to tell
Yes.
people to come. So if there's any one thing that you want a constituent, a citizen to know about Fulton County that is just not widely known, and if they watch this, they'll walk away knowing one thing, is there something you could think you would want them to know?
Well, I think it sounds trite, but we're here to serve. Don't think of government as some entity that no one likes or no one can get anything from just how you just expressed it. Our employees, all 5,000 of them, are either protecting us from harm, they are treating our water, they're providing medical services, they're providing behavioral health services,
Yeah.
they're providing something as popular. In fact, our most popular service is a library, which now is both digital and analog.
Yes,
using my
you know,
old
you can
term.
get books on tape, or I mean, audio books from our library. It's
unbelievable.
unbelievable. I tell people about it all the time. Please use the Fulton County Library System because it has so many great things. And the school year is about to begin, so
So I think that's it.
Yeah.
We are a resource.
Yes.
And generally a resource that's already been paid for, as you started this conversation with.
Right, right. So before we go, just a little fun. This is the bridge
Right.
that's over Pryor Street. Most people see not Civics for the People over it, but they see the big Fulton County sign. And I took I wanted to use this image because that image stands out so much on Pryor Street. When we see a trial going on, the reporters are always standing in front of that bridge. Tell us about that bridge and how you decided to put the Fulton County logo on that bridge.
So the bridge is very prominent because it's between the courts and the government center. It's also quite sizable.
Yeah.
It had nothing on it. And during our renovation of our atrium, and we were also doing something to the front of the court, it just became obvious. I guess I am a marketing person
Yeah.
by training.
Yeah.
And so it became obvious, hey, we were talking about billboards. We have a billboard. Let's
Yeah.
put the Fulton County logo, which also was redesigned and modernized, and then put Fulton County on the bridge. What I think we failed to understand, and you and I were talking about before, is how many impressions then are gained.
Yes.
And then if you were trying to advertise, what would those be worth? And I think it would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Absolutely.
Just based on the number of times this shows up.
Absolutely.
And so I'm really glad that we did that. I'd say we're better lucky than good sometimes, because I'm
Yeah.
not sure that we had that much forethought, but it has worked out tremendously.
Well, you know, I'm proud to be a commissioner. I'm proud to be able to have this conversation with you and to bring this information to the citizens. I think that prominent, sign lets everybody know where we are. And the next step is for people to come, or visit our website so that they can utilize all
Right.
the services that we have at their disposal. So I want to thank you this is our county manager, Dick Anderson, for telling us, what citizens need to know about your job and how we operate and budgets and all that. And thank you for coming to Civics for the People.
Thank you.
All right. Yay. All right, everybody. That is Dick Anderson.